All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Mindset. My name is Pete Deely, and I'm here with my professor, Professor Lucas Rubbo. Good morning,
Welcome back,
Professor.
everyone. Good morning, Pete. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. My friends are back to teasing me. They say you mention submission coffee every episode, and then you never tell people where to find it. So
That's
let
a
me
good
try.
point. That's a good point.
That's a fair criticism. So to support the podcast, you can get a monthly subscription to Submission Coffee. And if you go to submissioncoffee.com, you're going to land at the page. It's like $17. If you're local to us, you can pick it up at the gym. And if you're not local to us, we'll mail it to you. It's like $21 if we're going to mail it to you.
Perfect. And Scott Browse, you're waiting for your call because we need to up their credit card.
That's right.
Don't
That's right,
disappear.
Scott. That's right. We outed Coach Scott for bailing on us. But
Oh, man.
we have been lucky in that this journey, Professor Lucas, has allowed us to meet people that we wouldn't have otherwise met. People are starting to kind of find us a little bit. People like Pedro Sauer are a name that everybody recognizes, and so people might give us a shot to listen to us, and then that's turned into some really lucky situations. And today's another lucky situation. We have somebody who's been in the jiu-jitsu game for 19 years, closing in on his 20th year. And he's a head instructor. And I believe Professor Chad, it's Team East Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if I got that name precisely right.
Yeah, Team East Coast.
Team East Coast, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So welcome to our
Yeah.
podcast. We're excited to see you. For those of you that might see some of the video, this handsome man's also got perhaps, the best beard to be on this show. So follow us on Instagram at the Jiu-Jitsu Mindset. There's going to be videos there that won't disappoint you. So thank you very much for
yeah, thank you guys. I'm excited to talk to you guys. Anytime we get to talk about jiu-jitsu is a good day, right?
Right,
right.
Exactly.
Well, Professor Lucas, I'll let you do professor to professor. I'm going to cede the honors to you for the first question. So how should we start?
Perfect. Yeah, Chad, again, thanks so much for making the time being here with us. Well, from me, coming from Brazil, I'm always really curious on, like 20 years ago, pretty much, how jiu-jitsu was just kind of like just developed and starting in the United States, especially on East Coast. So I'm really curious on knowing what brought you to jiu-jitsu. If you could talk with us a little bit about your first experience, if you had some expectations about it, why you were thinking it, exactly what happened and things like that. Like I said, growing up in Brazil, that was something that was big since the 70s, 80s.
Right.
But here was just starting, right, on the mid-90s and early 2000s, around the time that we started. So I'm really curious to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so being an 80s kid, so I'll be 48 years old next month. I started karate back in the day because that's what you did in the 80s, right? That's really the martial art we had. So my dad started me, my first karate class was in 1982. So I did karate up through high school, kind of got tired of it, and then took time off from martial arts. And then I graduated in 1994 from high school. That's when the UFC started really hitting, right? And I can remember renting those movies from Blockbuster, those videos, and watching it and be like, the way I explain it is not like, I don't want to say my heroes are idols, but guys that did the striking art I did, karate, whatever it was, we're getting beat up by this guy in pajamas, right? And there was nobody around that did any type of jiu-jitsu or grappling in Ohio and where I'm at in Stark County. So I didn't find jiu-jitsu until I was 29 years old. But I always watched the UFC. I kind of went back to karate and I did some taekwondo, and I'm like, this isn't what I want anymore. I'm glad I started karate back in the day because that fueled my love for martial arts and kept me coming back and looking for things. So in 2004, I found East Coast Martial Arts, where I still am and I'm the instructor now. And that was really the only grappling in my area. And it was no-gi once a week.
That's it.
That was it.
Only class available once a week.
Oh yeah, that was it. And when I say no-gi, it was more like MMA a little bit. Like we would do some clinching drills on our feet. We would do wall drills, that kind of stuff. And it was
no gi now, you have like shorts, rash guard, have all kinds, right? So
Yeah.
on that time was more like a swimsuit,
Yeah, it
shirtless.
was. Yeah. I can remember going to my first class. There's not milestones, but memories I have from my first days of jiu-jitsu that I can still picture. I
Mhm.
remember showing up with like athletic shorts, a big t-shirt, and wrestling shoes. Like I didn't wrestle ever in my life, but I'm like, I think I need wrestling shoes. I did it, so it was tough, man. It was a lot of, I'm a small guy. Like right now I weigh about 155. I'm 6'1", so I'm always been a tall, lanky guy.
uh,
When I started jujitsu in 2004, I weighed 128 pounds.
Wow.
wow.
And no grappling, no any type of that, right? So I was definitely a fish out of water. And I remember this girl kicking the crap out of me. Um, and that's that moment where you choose, can your ego deal with this, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so I just kept going back. And 19 years later, I'm still there.
So Professor
That's
Chad,
awesome.
like I'm curious because I'm older than you are, and I
Hmm.
started jujitsu when I was 50. But
Okay.
when I was 29, I
Hmm.
felt, I definitely felt older than the
Yeah.
athletes that I trained around.
Right.
So like at 29, did you feel like an older person coming into this new sport? Because you might have been like a very good
Right.
athlete within the context of maybe your high school days, but you know,
Right.
like most of us, college and those early days of working, athletics
Um,
is just something. So, I mean, was it super comfortable for you, or did you like have to overcome when you talked about overcoming your ego? Professor
yeah,
and
I
I
don't think
talk
it
about that a
was.
lot.
Yeah, I don't think it was an older thing just because of where I was at East Coast. There was some people my age. It wasn't like
Okay.
now when you come into my gym, there's a lot of younger people, right?
Right.
Just because of the exposure that the sport has gotten and the bigger it's gotten. So
Yeah.
then I don't think it was that. It was just not knowing what the heck is going on. So
Yeah.
it wasn't an age thing for me. I got the age thing from my family. Like, you're 29 and you're still going to do this? You're getting old. Like, come on. I'm not, and I don't feel that way now.
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
that's one thing jujitsu will help keep you young because of the young people we're around,
Sure.
Um,
Yes.
if I could go back in time and, do jujitsu against that person that started, I would destroy them. I feel like even athletically, yes, I'm getting older and I got some aches and pains, but I feel like I'm in the best shape I've ever been in athletically, you know?
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
mean, I'm of the same mind, and I think one of the things that I favor, just from an athletic perspective, about
Mm,
jujitsu for people that might think that it's not for them who are older, is that if you
mm,
think about how you want to move until you die, like you want to be able to move in every plane. You want to be able
yeah,
to, not be thinking about the safety of moving up and down stairs, picking up kids,
yeah.
doing and there's very few, I think, opportunities in which your body has the opportunity to test itself in kind of every different position.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I just
I like,
the end
yeah,
of the end of last year, I just had my first ever jujitsu injury, knock on wood.
20 years
So
in, excellent.
20 years, yeah, my first ever injury that actually kept me. I was off the mat for 3 months. So I was
Wow.
passing guard, trying to pass. I swept, come up to pass guard, like knee cut. They
Hmm.
Mhm.
recovered me into like half guard a little bit, and I kept trying to pass, and my
Mhm.
knee popped. So I sprained my MCL pretty bad.
Yeah.
Um, so I stayed off the mat for 3 months. So, like I said, knock on wood. Um, that was my first injury, but we just had that conversation after class. Sometimes on how you guys are after class conversations with your
Yeah.
students are sometimes the best, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
100%.
Just talking about stuff. And I had one of my purple belts that had shoulder surgery, hurt his shoulder at Master Worlds last year, had surgery, just started coming back a couple months ago. But he said the rest of his body feels worse from taking that much time
Oh,
off than
interesting.
actually being in jujitsu because they're like, oh, yeah, take a break. You'll feel great. Like, I feel worse when I'm not training.
Hmm.
That's what kind of prompted this conversation the other day is like, man, how am I going to feel when I can't train anymore?
Yes.
Is your body going to start really like, I don't know, locking up is the right word or not, but
Right,
Mhm.
right.
we kept everything so fluid from doing jujitsu. Like, I teach 7, 8 classes a week and I roll with my students every class.
Mhm.
So I'm always, I feel like warmed up and loose and ready to roll. Like, man, I don't look forward to the days where I can't do that,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm of
I
the
think
mind that
that.
they, oh, sorry, Professor. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Pete.
Well, I just want to say I'm of the mind that, and we were talking to Felipe Della Monica. He's talking about rolling with uh, Master Carlos Gracie, right? And he's 67 and he's
Mhm.
vital. He moves super well, rolls every time he's in with his students. And I think that it is not unreasonable to think that if you have the attitude of like being able to stop and tap, we talk a lot about that, rather than force your way through things,
Yeah,
that
for
you can
sure.
minimize the injuries and extend, you know, the length of time that you can do that. But Professor Lucas, I cut you off. Forgive me. Go ahead.
No, I was just pretty much say the same thing that you guys said. On that point on, right, on that journey being so long training jiu-jitsu, doing jiu-jitsu movements like walking, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to do something more natural to you, right? Of course, some days, depending on the intensity of the training, things going to be a little bit further. But for us that love training, being spending so much time of our life doing that, it's like it's taking a part away from you if you can train, right? And the beauty
Yeah.
of jiu-jitsu, one of them is the ability to adapt the movements, adapt to your game, to try to protect yourself a little bit, right? That's how some of the positions in jiu-jitsu got developed by people that had some injury, right? I always say that about the half guard. That's how it was actually developed by Roberto Gordo, yeah. And because had a knee injury, he couldn't do close guard anymore, so he started playing more sideways, you know, and okay, what can I do from there? And that's just one more great point about jiu-jitsu, right? The ability to adapt to your game, to your body type, to your limitations and everything.
Yep. I've been preaching to my students a lot lately about efficiency and longevity.
Right.
And
Yes.
that efficiency will come as you get more comfortable in your technique and get your rank and stuff, obviously. But I feel like my jujitsu is based on that. You know, I'm not stronger than anybody there where I'm just going to grab you and physically move you. I have to make you give me something to move. But I feel that's the important thing with jujitsu. We want to do this till we're older and keep going, right? So,
Yes.
but it's hard when you're younger in your journey to get wrapped up. I always call it a firefight. Like you want to get into a firefight with somebody and it's like we're just banging heads. Like go around them. You don't have to go through them.
Yes.
But again, that comes with time and confidence too, you know.
Is that what part of what has kept you safe over these years? I mean, that's a very long record of injury-free
I think
jiu-jitsu times.
so. I think some of it is just luck too, you know, like,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is, I think, knowing when to take time off, because I used to be the guy that was at the gym no matter what. If there was a class, if there was an open mat, if it was a holiday and there was an open mat, I was at the gym. And I'm not like that anymore. I'm off. The gym is closed on Fridays. I don't go in. Sundays, we have an open mat. One of the other black belts leads that and does that, and I'm not there. And on vacation, I'm not worried about going in training while I'm on vacation. Not that that wouldn't be cool to, you know, get some exposure, but you know what? This is family time. So that's my biggest thing, is I've learned to take time off when I need. And we've had a lot of seminars in and high level guys, and we always have those Q&As, and somebody will be like, hey, what's the most important part of your training? And it's always rest, sleep, and recovery.
Yeah.
You know, you can get those, there's always time to do jujitsu.
Yes.
But a lot of that's luck too. You know, I've been very lucky and no, I think knowing, sometimes who to train with, you know, maybe today I don't train with the 250-pound white belt that just started, you know, we save that for another day or whatever. But, I think it's okay. I don't know if we tell our students enough. I think we tell our female students a lot, like, hey, you don't have to roll with that person. But it's okay to tell your male students that as well. Like, hey, you don't have to roll with that young kid if you don't want to. And that's fine. Go roll with somebody else. They're like, oh, I don't want to, you know, offend them. It's okay. We can have those discussions. They're not fun or they're not comfortable sometimes. But I think picking those partners are very crucial too, especially on days where maybe you're not feeling it.
Yes, I think it's so important. So important. Everything that you're saying about resting, right? Especially having your life so attached to jiu-jitsu. Well, I always say that, guys, if I get hurt today, tomorrow I need to be here again. I need to teach class, right? So you need to listen yourself. And some days I won't roll with that specific guy, and you know, and now it's on because the next day I have another one that's going to be doing the same and things like that. But for the students also to understand that never, like, you shouldn't roll on the same way against everyone, right? Every training partner, every body type, every game, every different that you have between your training partner, your role should be different. And
Yep.
this also help, right, for them to keep it safe and keep the longevity on their journey, and
Yep.
so fun as well, right? I think fun
Mhm.
on training is something really important to keep them consistency doing that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're not having fun, I mean, why are we doing it, right? Like
Right.
you just got, and I think, and I can tell by you guys are chill and laid back, and I'm sure your environment at your academy is that way too. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a huge thing. Like the environment that we've developed over the years at our gym at East Coast is, I feel like, is second to none. And I hope everybody feels that their academy is that way. You should, right?
Yeah.
But I think we have that vibe that we go hard some days, like comp training, like, hey, we're going to get after it
Yeah.
and come, and
Sure.
we're going to come at each other. But there's a safe way to do that too, obviously with experience. But like I don't have those, like I roll every class and I'm not like worried about watching like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
but is so and so going with that person? I don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we've developed that atmosphere that I don't have to worry about that. And I have those talks. If I see somebody coming, like a new white belt coming hard, I've had this conversation the last couple of weeks. Um, like, hey, you got to chill out, or we're gonna have this conversation, and you're not, or you're gonna get hurt, and I don't want that to happen by,
Yeah.
like, being a higher rank. Like um, I can handle those situations in those roles differently. Like a new person might have to get a little rougher or
Mm-hmm.
go harder, and I don't want any of them to get hurt. So
Yes.
the
Yeah.
higher ranks can kind of feel that differently.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's also the vibe and the environment you create at your gym that helps that too.
That was so, we talk a lot about mindset and sort of approach to
Mhm.
things, and as somebody, when I think about my physical training outside of jiu-jitsu, like strength training and those, where my attitude and my approach has a much more relaxed disposition to it, where I
Yeah.
think less about load and less about intensity and more about consistency and strength in position, rather than like strength all the way through a particular range of motion. In other words, not
Right.
trying to gauge um, increase load for increased reps as my only measure of having a successful workout. And it's
Right.
made it, on some level, it's like less exciting because it's a less dramatic experience. But
Right.
I feel better. I feel like I continue to get stronger. Um, when you think about like the mindset required for people, the mindset that you've developed, I should say, in your academy seems to be
Mhm.
one in which um, you can feel safe and comfortable with
Right.
opportunities to increase your intensity, which I
Mhm.
think produces great results. But could you maybe give some examples of how you are communicating that culture? Because we encourage people, like if you haven't gone to a jiu-jitsu, we want academy to sit in the room and watch how they treat each other, watch how they talk to each
Right.
other, get a sense
Yep.
of the culture. And your culture sounds similar to what we build out here in Arizona. But how did you accomplish that? Like, what are some of the things that
I
indicate
don't,
that's how it goes here?
yeah, I mean, it's tough, I think, to explain it, right?
Hmm.
I think it's something that just has happened organically over the years, but it's talking to your students, like sitting down, like after class or before we roll, myself or the other black belts will talk to the students like, hey, this is what we expect. Just like I told you, there are days where we might go harder, but it's also, we watch out for each other, because if I
Mm-hmm.
don't have you, I don't have a training partner for today
Right.
or tomorrow. Or if you don't have me as the coach for today, luckily we have 4 black belts, counting myself at our academy. I just promoted my first 2 last year.
Nice.
So we're very lucky. We have a handful of a few brown belts and a handful of purple belts and brown and blue belts. So we're very lucky at what we developed over the years. But it's just, I think, having those conversations that I've stopped class before, like on the drilling side of things. Like, hey, I'm not a drill sergeant. I'm not going to yell at you to drill. I'm not that guy. Um, but I'll stop class sometimes and be like, hey man, why are we here? Are you here because you want to do jujitsu? I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying good money to be here. So let's utilize that time and drill some technique. If you have a question, sometimes my class is off 35, 40 people in a class. So I'm, moving around the
All
gym like,
around.
hey, raise your hand, yell at me, coach, Chad, whatever you want to, you don't have to call me professor, whatever. get my attention so I can come help you versus just sitting there and waiting on me to come around or another high rank to come around to help you. But I think it's just having conversations with your students on what you expect and what you're not going to tolerate. Like, I'm not going to tolerate you being this way or having this attitude. And we can have, I don't want to lose students ever. I want everybody to stay at East Coast. But if it comes to if you're not going to change, maybe we're not for you. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of a harder way to look at it, but
I always say that or people change and meet the expectations that the environment, the culture that you have at the gym. Right? And I would say most part of the times they change because
yes, absolutely.
If you have a good culture, of course, right? Which I can see that guys definitely have, or they just leave, right?
Yeah,
it's really,
or they just leave. Yep.
I think it's really hard, at least so far, lucky enough, I never got to a point where I need to expel someone, like never show up here again.
Right.
That's what usually happens, right? Or they, well, that's actually a good place to be. Let me change a little bit my way to deal and think through things. And you get so surprised how people actually can change and be a good example after that, right? If not, well, you know, the door is open for you to come in and come out, find your the best path to you. But I believe those conversations that you have been talking so much before class, after class, in Brazil, in Portuguese, we call it resenha after the training. Sometimes they are the message, right, that you send after class. Sometimes those are even more important than the technique that you're teaching.
100%.
Right? Because it's that message, that piece of word that is missing for that person on that day, right? Sometimes something just to inspire them to keep going, and sometimes something for they understand the movement better, right? But I love having like speeches like that. Hear people talking about their experiences, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Professor Chad, we often talk about this notion of like people who come in that might be too timid, too like, you know, lack certain confidence, that jiu-jitsu may be an opportunity that raises, you know, that often raises their confidence. And then on the other side, like someone who might be too aggressive, that jiu-jitsu could humble them into a more reasonable sort of approach to thing. And so we believe in this notion of transformation, that jiu-jitsu is a vehicle to become a better human being. You have so much history with, you know, people in your academy. Do you have a story of maybe a transformation that you observed where someone came in a particular way and then you know, they grew in a positive way, you know, through training with you guys, spending time with you guys?
There's probably a lot, and you guys could probably say the same thing, right? You see it so much. And I don't, we have somebody in right now. I think they've been coming in maybe 6 months, 7 months. And this person, he was very, very timid, very quiet, shy. And in this little amount of time, I'm not going to say, I won't say names and anything like that, but in this a little bit of time, I've seen that person, I feel like, when they walk in the door, their shoulders are a little broader and their head's up a little higher, just because of the confidence of jiu-jitsu, and they're getting it. You know what I mean? So that's the most recent example, but I think we see that all the time, right? And I don't think we stop and smell the roses maybe enough and really admire that, right? Like it really does. And I've said this on our podcast, and we've had a lot of people say like jiu-jitsu is for everyone. We hear this a lot.
Right.
And what we like to say, or what I like to say, is jiu-jitsu is for everyone, but everyone's not for jiu-jitsu. Or we would all have 500, 600, 700 students at our gym, or whatever, if it was for everyone. So jiu-jitsu is, but everyone's not for it, I think too. I
agree.
But yeah, that recent one, just of, you know, putting in it, and it's, I hate to use the word grind because I think it's overused. Like, oh, we love the grind. We just love jiu-jitsu. And I think we just like hanging out with our friends that are like-minded too. That helps us too, coming back. Right.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Most recent.
I mean, there's a notion that I think conflict in a safe environment, it can be likened to like stress on the muscles, and that like if you can have a conflict and continually develop the ability to relax in the conflict, right? We use this expression all the time, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. That in the midst of having someone's elbow pressing, on you, and you're uncomfortable physically in this way, but you're safe, right? Like you have some safety to know this is uncomfortable, but not dangerous. Then so many other conflicts in life are uncomfortable, but not necessarily dangerous, and only escalate out of fear. Someone's in a personal conflict and they're fearful, and then their fear, maybe presents as anger or additional aggression, and now you have an escalation. I didn't go, but Professor and a number of other folks went to the ADCC, competition last year, and I was asking one of the group, like, what was the disposition of the average person you came across there? Average meaning, just of the people, what were people generally acting like? And he said it was such a polite group of people. And I was really struck by that, because here we have what, if you weren't in the jiu-jitsu community, you might think, well, this is like a testosterone filled, raging environment where everybody's looking for an opportunity to show how tough they are, or whatever. But instead, like the report was, it was a very gracious group of people who really, were mindful of like how to treat each other. So when I think about those transformations, I think so much conflict in our life, we don't get a chance to resolve very easily, and it just makes us nervous and anxious. We're in training sessions, the conflict has a short duration. It can have a positive outcome or negative outcome that's obvious. And I feel like that. And when I look at the kids, we hear these stories of kids showing up to bullies that they were, previously victims of. The world's a better place because those kids feel safer. Do you have children at the academy? Is kids a big part of what you do there?
So we have a smaller, like, youth Brazilian jiu-jitsu program, but East Coast was founded on a kids karate program from back in the day.
Okay.
So a little like brief history. It started with a Shotokan karate background. We've been open since 1986. The founder of East Coast, Steve Heineman, he unfortunately passed away of cancer in 2015. And I took over managing, and I've known him, he was there when I started. So we were very, very good friends. He was a very good big mentor of mine. So his wife still owns the facility. And I run day to day everything for her. So we have a lot of kids in I'm going to call it karate. We still kind of call that for marketing, I guess, but karate is a very generic term to me anymore. Right. Our karate program is kickboxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and functional self-defense. We don't once they get their black belts, we kind of reintroduce some of the traditional forms and katas to them. But from white belt up until that black belt is all functionality based stuff. It's the old school Gracie self-defense and headlock escapes and stuff that I didn't learn in 1982 in karate. You know what I mean? Why don't we learn ground fighting in karate? It's because you'll never go to the ground. That's why, right? That old school mentality of looking back at my karate as a 90-pound wrestler would have dumped me on my head, so easy. But we have a pretty big karate program at our facility too, but it does involve jiu-jitsu and stuff. So
nice. And I think it's important. I mean, the martial art, right? The martial art part is what the value is, what you, especially for the kids, what you will be teaching them so much, and hopefully they will carry that for the rest of the life, right? We have a good kids program here on our school, and if you have something in common to say about everyone that is starting, every parent that is bringing their kids, mostly is for them learn some discipline and respect, right? So it's all about the values, and of course you're going to have some specific situations about knowing how to defend themselves and bullying, well, this happened at the school and things like that, and that comes with the confidence that the martial art teaches them, right? And I always like to say that confidence is not something that dude, it's step 1, 2, 3, you're going to be confident. Everyone's going to be different. It might take a weeks, months, or years for you to be able to apply that confidence. But when we see that happen, is the best feeling ever, right?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Chad, I have one more question actually, because we were talking a little bit about your journey, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you like how is that translation for you on being a student to become a full-time instructor? Like, what is the things that you're looking for as an instructor to your students and
Yeah.
like that?
So, I think that's changed over the years as learning things myself.
Mhm.
So we didn't, like I told you guys, when I started at East Coast, it was no gi once a week, right?
Mhm.
So eventually we talked Steve Heineman, I told you guys about, the owner, into doing some gi. And he was like, he was always a student. That's the biggest thing I learned about him right away, is he was a black belt in karate forever, didn't have any rank in jujitsu, but he was going to, like, in the probably the late 90s, he was going to California and training with the Machados a little bit. And he
Yeah.
was seeking out Thai instructors he trained with Bob Cheney, who was a big Thai guy out of Vegas. And he was
Uh-huh.
bringing that into his curriculum. And that's why our karate program is what it is because of him. He
Mhm.
changed it because he wanted functionality, because, the early UFCs opened our eyes to things like, hey, this stuff doesn't work like we thought it did. Um,
Mhm.
so that's where we got to that. So we finally talked him into doing a gi program, which at the time we had a blue belt that trained somewhere else. We all trained gi in this guy's basement, which was a big story for guys my age who started when we did, is we trained in guys' basements, right? So the blue belt actually couldn't do it anymore. So he turned it over to me teaching as a two-stripe white belt. So I was teaching class as a two-stripe white belt. Again, none of us knew very much. And
Yeah.
I was maybe lucky to know a little bit more because I was training with some other, maybe I think the guy that I trained with in his basement just got his purple belt, which
Mhm.
again was a big thing. And I didn't realize how big a thing it was. I didn't know, I knew a progression in karate of belts, but I had no idea what jujitsu rank was. No clue.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't care at that time and didn't know what the stripes really meant. So I was teaching as an early in my journey. But I would teach what I know, and I would teach a little bit of, DVDs were a big thing back then. And my instructor in that basement was getting DVDs and he would copy them and give them to me. So I would watch Marcelo. The Marcelo
Nice.
DVDs weren't even, they were dubbed to English because he was teaching in Portuguese. So they were like old school stuff. So I was lucky to, seeing that how Steve Hyman was on learning. Like, I'm like, I want to be like him. I want to learn from everyone. So I started doing seminars and seeking out, I made friends going, to places, and I would go to their gym and learn stuff. And I would just kind of teach what I knew. And that just kind of
Mhm.
over time, just got better and better being around people. And in, I don't know what year it was, 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. Charles Allen was a black belt he was a Gracie Baja black belt that moved into our area. I think he
Mhm.
actually had, are you guys in Arizona, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So he had a gym in Arizona for a while. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to send it to you after.
Yeah.
But he had a jiu-jitsu gym. He was a black belt also under Chuck Norris and on the karate side of things.
Uh-huh.
And I think he went up to brown belt under Pedro Sauer and then moved to Florida and got his black belt from Marcio Simas from Gracie
Awesome.
Baja.
Yeah, yeah.
So Charles opened my eyes to a lot of, not just like, he didn't show me any earth-shattering techniques like I was like, wow. But it was more the mindset things where I got from him, where I would ask
Mhm.
him like, hey, I'm older and smaller than a lot of these guys and I can't keep their pace. What do I do? He's like, why are you trying to keep their pace? That's where you need
Mhm.
to learn jujitsu and slow them down. I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here. Um, but that's where I learned the mindset of jujitsu from him.
So,
So I
I
think
mean,
I just,
yeah, I'm
go ahead.
curious. I mean, you have like just listening to this last little stretch here. I mean, you have a lot of experience with a lot of different people and across these
Yeah.
different martial art domains.
Yeah.
Hicks and Gracie will use that expression, invisible jujitsu. Where
Yeah.
there are these like I watch some of like uh Hiring Gracie, a couple of like where I watch them in their movements and they're so effortless and they just seem to be,
Right.
Hickson's phrase, invisible jujitsu. They're
Right.
applying adjustments to their body that I can't really
See, yeah.
understand. Like I can
Yeah.
observe it, but I can't do, well, never mind, I can't do it. I'm not even quite sure kind of how it becomes effective. In all of this sort of training across different, is there a story of somebody that you were training with where the notion of invisible jujitsu was so present, like you couldn't believe that this person was moving people around, or whatever you might like to describe
Yeah,
such
nothing that really
excellence at that.
like, I mean, rolling with Charles when he came into town, and I remember him coming. I was a blue belt when he came in, and I was teaching.
Right.
And this guy walked into the class was already going. He walked in and he sat on the bleachers, and I'm like, when I get a chance, I'll go talk to him, And he's like, I just moved to town. I'm a black belt, and at that time, and still, when somebody says they're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I will always say Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because obviously there's differences. You don't know.
Yeah.
And he was, and immediately, like that night, I was getting online trying to research him. But I remember, and he was older than I was too. And I just remember him being effortless. He was bigger than me, but not like a lot. And I just remember him sweeping me like really easily. Not, just felt that time. And then as a white belt, I trained with Eduardo Barros. He's a Nueva Unión guy. Under Andre Pendaneris, and he had a gym up in Akron, half hour from us. And I had some friends that would go up there, and he was very as accomplished as a youth in Brazil, and never competed much as an adult. But I rolled with him one time, and it was the most unstable I've ever felt in jiu-jitsu. And it was what I can still feel. I know I was a white belt. I didn't know nothing, but he played spider guard a lot, and I just felt like a puppet. Like I never touched the ground. Like my toe might touch the ground for a minute, but then the other one was not touching the ground. So those are the two like effortless moments, and I'm sure there's others, but those stick out a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love that term, just because I know when there's most everybody in the gym is bigger and stronger than I am. And so when I'm being, when I'm being thrown, or, I know that, like, yes, the technique is better, but it's also a bigger, stronger guy doing it. Where I get more impressed is, in my experience, is more what you're saying, is where I am being moved, but it's not violent, and I'm not even sure.
Violent. Yeah.
I'm not even quite sure. I know we call jiu-jitsu the gentle art, but where something about like the position of the body has made it impossible for me to resist the intent of my training partner. And that is a fascinating experience, because I don't know. I mean, when I was a kid, in the early 80s, karate was my thing. But when I think back on it, it had more in common with dancing than martial arts. Like we had a lot of like movements, but the movements truly weren't, I don't even know that they were designed for my age to be truly martial. But then I boxed, and boxing was, definitely martial. I mean, it's very practical. And when you get punched in the face, it's a different experience than other things. Like, it's not, being punched in the nose is only like being punched in the nose. There's nothing else quite like that. But and I find that, and I'm not like any great competitor, but I like to do the competitions that are available to us, locally. When I think about trying to regulate, having big energy and like being excitable and wanting to be assertive, and then trying to actually find a calmer gear, and how that calmer gear is a more effective martial position even than being kind of spazzy or whatever, being too excitable. And these are the things that I feel like carry over off the mats into life, that notion of how do you find that real even, constant, useful disposition rather than wasting energy. Because you talked about efficiency. I think that applies to a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think efficiency is a very hard thing to understand and apply and learn, especially early in your journey. They're like, I don't, you see two white belts, and I have a blue belt that's asked me about, like, he gets tired in jiu-jitsu, in competition. He's like, I get so tired. And I'm like, yeah, because you're expelling all of your energy. He's like, how don't I do that? And it's time, I feel. It's really, it's time. It's nothing you can just turn off and on, because if somebody comes at you, you're going to use whatever attribute you have that's better than theirs. And a lot of times that's strength and athletic ability. And unfortunately, that's going to get you tired, so I think that just comes with some time.
I agree.
That's when we talk about like jiu-jitsu as compared to other martial arts, Professor Lucas has talked a little bit about the time requirement, and that, we don't have 16-year-old black belts in jiu-jitsu, generally speaking, right? I mean, that notion that when you talk about being able to be calm, being a function of experience, that you get that way over time. And that's part of, we use that expression, the blue belt curse, in that we see people give up before they really get the pleasure of being able to participate in jiu-jitsu in a way that's more enjoyable, and being relaxed and comfortable and being able to choose your movements as opposed to them being chosen
Yeah.
for you doesn't happen overnight.
It does not. No. And like you said, that blue belt curse, we've all probably who knows how many we could count of blue belts we've lost because of that. And probably getting a blue belt in jiu-jitsu might be one of the hardest things anybody has ever done in their life, right?
Yeah.
There's so many peaks and valleys, and where you feel good and then you feel like crap. And that's not going to stop just because of the color of your belt. But
Right.
in the moment, that's what you feel. So I think it's just getting past those, at some point, we always say don't chase the belt, follow the journey, but it's hard not to get wrapped up in that belt too, I feel. And everybody's journey is different. I've been, as an instructor, I have to keep that in my mind, because like I was a brown belt for 6 years. And I'm glad I was, looking back, because I wasn't ready when I got it. I don't feel I was ready. And I'm glad I had that time in that rank, because I forgot about, and there was times where I'm like, you know what, maybe I'm not going to get my black belt. We had some affiliation changes over the years and some time from that. And I was okay with that. But it did feel good when I got my black belt. I will say that, obviously, it still felt good. But I try to get people not to be worried about, what do I got to do to get to my blue belt? It's like, just keep showing up. We hear that. I think Chris Howder, it's like Chris Howder says that, like, after 10 years, you're going to be somewhere. Where are you going to be? Know? And you might be a black belt by that time. With that, I think our learning curve is getting a little shorter on people getting their rank quicker. I think my guideline for a blue belt is 2 to 3 years, depending on that person, probably about 2. But
yeah,
I
mean, we take the ratio of like white belts to become black belts. That's an extraordinary narrow group of people, but it's a big group of people compared to everybody who never tried jiu-jitsu and then the person who tried, right? I mean, it's you could say it's the hardest belt to get. It's the white belt's actually the hardest of them all.
First stripe on the white belt.
First stripe on the white belt. Can you make it through the first month? And that's part of our intent here, right? Our intent is we're talking to people, generally speaking, who are considering jiu-jitsu, right? So when we do this podcast, we're saying, hey, we want you to find a place that you feel comfortable, and we believe there are many to choose from. And then for those people like myself who are beginners, they just like continue to show up and keep pressing on. Well, Professor Lucas, as we kind of head into the conclusion here, anything that any questions you want to ask before we come to time?
Like always, right? We can always keep talking. It's easy to talk about jiu-jitsu. Easy to talk with you, Professor Chad. I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing a little bit of a story and your gym. We wish you all the best. You're more than welcome to join us anytime. And if you could end our conversation with any message for possible future jiu-jitsu practitioners, or especially those guys that are on that moment that they're struggling a little bit on their journey, would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to bring this up earlier, and I kept forgetting, and I remembered right before before you asked. I don't think we talk about small goals in jiu-jitsu enough. It's always the next belt. Like, oh, you got a blue belt. Purple's next, and that's what they see. But it's those, those in between, getting those stripes or whatever. But I think it's making those small goals with your instructor if you need be. Like I have my instructor, James Klingerman, gave me these papers that I'll pass out every once in a while. I haven't done it for a while, and it's like a worksheet on what you want to work on. Some people might need to write it down and look at it. Like, what am I going to work on? If I pass the guard and get to side control, what's my first move tonight? And having those, like when you're rolling with the black belt, Lucas, like when your blue belt's rolling with you, their goal shouldn't really be to pass your guard. If that's their only goal, they're probably going to fail, right?
Yeah.
So maybe their goal is for you to only sweep them 3 times instead of 10, or get submitted once instead of 3, or whatever that is. I think those small goals are so important, because if you just concentrate on that next big one, that's going to really, I think, weigh heavily on you. Like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I love it. I gotta use that message for sure. I pretty like it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got
Yeah.
to have those small goals.
Yeah. So Professor Chad, let's, from Arizona, we extend our gratitude to you, and the work you're doing out there, because I believe that what you're doing is changing people's lives. I think that, the people who have come through your academy, whether they were there for, a month or a year or multiple years, they're going to take those things with them into their life. I'm of the mind that you have to be strong to keep people safe. And so, when I talk to you, I can hear a lot of strength in what you're doing. You're creating a culture that insists on respecting each other, that, being careful, having a long view rather than a short view. And I love what you just said about short goals, because the truth is that every big goal is broken down into lots of small steps. The whole journey of 1,000 miles is the first step. And I think about trying to enjoy the achievement of each of those little tiny milestones. It's not always evident, like what should be the next thing to work on, because it feels sometimes when I, roll with people, like it's all broken. Like I got to figure out.
I can do it all. Yeah.
I need to figure, which is, the pleasure to that is that everything improves, because all of it for me is such at the beginning.
And that's I was telling somebody the other night, is like a white belt. They're like, what should I work on? I'm like, well, you don't want to give them that everything answer. You need to work on everything. Work when it's time to spar and roll, work on what we just did in class. That's the easiest thing. Try to funnel yourself to that position and work on it. I was working on some half guard passing and getting to like 3/4 mount, and like knee cutting to the other side the other day. It's the easiest thing to, like, their hips are already facing one way. Let's knee cut to the other side. And I saw a handful of people in that position just trying to force their knee out. I'm like, what do you do? We just did it. We just did it. You have to like put yourself in that position. Like, oh, wait a minute. Let me calm down. I'm safe here. What did we just do? Or what do I know from here?
Yeah.
And maybe that's you going home and writing down what you know from each position and focusing on that. Because with our, with all the knowledge out there with BJJ fanatics, and we can look up any move, right?
Right.
You can get caught up in that whirlwind. Just do what your instructor is showing you. Not saying don't learn anything, but trust your instructor.
It enforces patience, right? I mean, because the thing, what you're saying is slow down, pick something, be bad at the thing that you don't know how to do until you're good at it.
Until you're good. And one last story I'll share with you guys.
Yeah, please.
We have an annual cancer awareness seminar, and we donate all the money to a local charity. And I did it in honor of my friend that passed away. We've done this year. We're having Kenny Kim in. It's going to be awesome. Last year we had John Carlo in, and luckily I had him booked. We had him booked, and then he won ADCC. I'm like, this is amazing. But he did a Q&A at the end, and I wish I would have said it then in front of everybody, because I don't think everybody picks up on answers. And they would say, all right, how do you structure your training? And he'll say, I listen to what John tells me to do, John Donaher. When do you do your strength training? I listen to John. When do you go hard? I listen to John. He trusts his coach. Like, no, not all of us are John Donaher, right? But you're coming to us and keep coming to us for a reason. We've been through some times and figured out what works and doesn't work and what we like. So trust your coach. Trust your coach.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, it's part and parcel of the theme, right? Have humility that you don't know everything. You're here to learn stuff, and find people that you have enough comfort and respect for, that they can be the guide on your journey. And there's lots of people who are at where you'd like to be as a person and as a jiu-jitsu player, and to pay attention to them, model yourself, take a look at them, and try to do what they do.
100%.
I mean, in the end, you learn all the rules, you do things as they are, so that way you can break them, right? So, but you can't, can't start to break them unless you learn them properly. Otherwise you're just doing stuff wrong. You're not being creative. You're not a master of it. Well, Professor Chad, thank you very much. This was a great conversation, and we look forward to, perhaps there'll be a time you come back and join us for another interview.
For sure.
We're going to follow you on. Oh, and someone wants to find you on social media. What's your preference? Where would you like them to come?
Anyway, on Instagram is Team East Coast _BJJ. That's our team page. Okay. I also do a podcast, Limitless Radiocast, that you can find us on all major platforms and YouTube. And then I also have a company called Limitless Tape. So it's like
Okay.
finger tape and all that
Sure.
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
So I can, I'll get with you guys after, send me your address and I'll send you some samples to check out. Cause we do like
Awesome. Yeah.
wholesale for academies. I'm starting to do gear for academies like rash guards and stuff.
Mhm.
Right.
So we can chat about that too.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those of you, we got a chance to spend another hour with someone, terrific. And we hope you're inspired to get on the mat if you haven't given it a try. And if you've started, we hope that you're inspired to continue, because your jiu-jitsu journey only gets richer and better as you go along. So don't give up. Keep going.